the UK's Independent Sentencing Council has introduced new guidelines that are due to start that essentially say, before you lock someone up, get a pre-sentence report if they're under 25, a woman from a racial background, or someone who is fleeing abuse, a religious minority, or someone who's pregnant. In other words, understand the context before dishing out punishment. That's it. But what's the government's response? Panic, outrage, and emergency legislation. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood says there will never be a two-tier sentencing approach under my watch. And Starmer says he's disappointed. Ministers are prepping a last-minute bill to override the guidelines within 24 hours because nothing screams democracy like bulldozing an independent body to avoid a Daily Mail headline with the strapline that says two-tier care. Let's be clear, the Sentencing Council's chair, Lord Justice Davis, already explained it. He says the rule of law requires that all offenders are treated fairly. The section of the guideline relating to pre-sentence reports is directed to the issue of information about offenders, no more and no less. But apparently for this government, even understanding the social realities that lead people into crime is too radical. Why? Because the real two-tier justice system already exists, Shabana, and it's not new. If we look at the stats, Black Brits make up 4% of the population, but 13% of the prison population. Young adults between the ages of 18 to 25 are 10% of society, but are a third of those locked up. And 57% of women in prison are survivors of domestic abuse. That's your two-tier system. One for the poor, the racialized, the abused. One for the people who get stopped, searched, sentenced, and forgotten. This guidance, I think, attempts to try and shift that. It tells judges, look deeper, think twice, and don't turn people into case numbers without knowing their story. What do you think, Sam? The writer's saying that this is woke gone mad, and we're told judges should be blind, but isn't that just a euphemism for pretending class, race, and gender don't matter when they're everything in how punishment is handed out?
Yeah, I mean, this is a mess. It's one of those things that I think in the long run probably isn't going to be like talked about at a high level or remembered too much outside of maybe people like ourselves who are like very invested in this sort of thing politically. But I think it speaks to a much wider, I'll say, issue with the current government, which is, as you were explaining, their severe obsession with optics and the way they're terrified of being perceived as anything remotely left or progressive in that top level way. I went and I read about pre-sentencing reports when obviously I knew I was coming on here to talk about them. And I actually read Lord Davis's letter that he sent back to Shabana Mahmood in regards to this entire issue. And he essentially explained, from what I understand, that she requested that the full list of people for who pre-sentencing reports are sort of required or suggested be removed because of the them wanting to put ethnic, cultural, and faith minorities in there. So instead of like just targeting that, they've suggested that, or the Labour government suggested that if a pre-sentencing report was going to help, then it would be sought out anyway. This is the process which would occur. And Lord Davis, the leader of the Sentencing Council, essentially said back to her, if that was going to happen, it would already happen. Why do you think we've had to put this in place? And it's bizarre because it's like, firstly, why is the government trying to get so involved in the judiciary, in the outcomes of, and the way in which outcomes are affected by the judiciary? Second, is that suggesting that we then shouldn't believe in the independence of the judiciary, or that somehow the independence of the judiciary is being compromised? And thirdly, it goes back to the weird specificities and the terror of the headlines. Again, the terror of being called two-tier Kia. Instead of actually just trying to explain this to people, instead of creating a sophisticated and effective messaging system to get it through the media into the public to explain what it is, I really don't think people long term would care about this. The only thing is you could see the way in which the right would, and are trying to exploit it. And instead of defending it, instead of cracking down and saying, oh, this is obviously going to be good because an independent body has recommended we do this, no, they've essentially forced them to suspend plans. Which I think is what's happening now.
No, completely agree with you. And what's interesting as well is that this institutional bias already exists, but what they're doing is that they're prioritizing how they're viewed in the media way more than actually interrogating the mishaps, the issues that form the fabrics of a lot of the systems that we already exist within. The system is in fact already two-tiered, and how do we know this? Because decades of data literally prove that. The justice system already treats people differently based on the factors that we've listed earlier today. And actually often worse based on some of those factors. So it's not by explicit rule, but it's already through deeper biases and social inequalities. So there's long been a two-tier reality. So when I hear, Shabana say or claim that I'm not going to accept a two-tier system, I'm like, hello, babes, it's already a two-tier system. And I think the move here, I think, is an attempt to make justice a little bit more equal and not less. But I don't know if they're going to see it that way. So I guess my next question for you is, when a government rushes in this sort of way to override independent sentencing advice because it's worried about how it looks politically, what does that actually say about the state of our democracy?
It's concerning, isn't it? Because, as I've said, if you start to call into question the rule of law, if you start to call into question the way in which the judiciary operates, where is that going to end? Where the entire point of our system is to have is to be able to bring laws into effect and have them effectively implemented. And if then the government is essentially saying these laws aren't being effectively implemented, then it is up to them to do something about that. But this isn't what this is. This is them telling the judiciary that they're doing it wrong and they need to do it in a different way, which is completely separate to government-led intervention on these sorts of things. As you've said, there is a two-tier system already. There's always been a two-tier system in this country, in probably every country when it comes to justice, because fundamentally, crime and crime rates are disproportionately affecting working class people, ethnic minorities, survivors of abuse, stuff that we've said previously. And if you are really going to tackle crime, if you're going to tackle and bring crime rates down and create a more equal system, then you're going to tackle essentially the economic factors that really cause them. The way in which people grow up, essentially being led into these lives and these livelihoods and thinking this is the way of life that is effective, or it being the way of life that is the most effective for these people. It's terrifying from a democratic standpoint, because it once again seems like we can see these issues and we can see the way in which they're manifesting, and they're going to continue to manifest. And each time we invest our hope or our actual mandate in a group of people to do it, they fail to do so, and they seem to attack once again different aspects of even the state themselves and the system to avoid actually addressing the issues at hand. And it is scary, and it makes us call into question why we bother interacting with it, but it also makes us call into question, can we trust them to be the ones doing it? I don't know if we can.
I think it's a really good question, because and I don't know if we can actually either. I can't answer that. I personally don't at this very moment in time, because if there was, and like it goes back to what you were saying, a willingness to interrogate why these things are happening in the first place, then you would try or attempt at least to fix the years and years of austerity that people have had to deal with, fix the fact that all of these cuts have happened to youth services, the fact that community centres aren't even existing anymore. Like, crime is increasing because inequality is increasing. So what are you going to do about it? I think these are the questions we should be asking. It's not whether, I think Keir Starmer needs to put his ego aside, and Shabana needs to you know, really get in the real world. It's naive, I think, for any of us to ignore the political optics that come with this. And I do think that the Labour Party, in some ways, and this is going to be super critical, have proven that they're happy to dip their toe into culture wars on the issue, because they know the attacks that are going to come from the right. They know that the right are going to say, "Oh, two-tier Keir back at it again." So they're going to dabble with that sort of stuff. I think we already exist in a divided justice system that doesn't favor anyone, but particularly really ostracizes those that come from minoritized backgrounds. So the fact that he's too scared or too afraid of the fact that he's going to be painted as someone who does favor minorities, I think says a lot about the fact that he's unwilling to rectify the issues that are already being placed or entrenched in our society at the moment. And that, to me, makes justice seem more performative than principled. And it's ironic because Shabana and Keir, I'm pretty sure, both come from, law backgrounds. So they would know too well what the justice system entails when it comes to the harm for minoritized communities. So there is a level of irony there. And Shabana also comes from a minoritized background, so she would know all too well what an unfair system looks like. Not that I'm trying to weaponize her identity, but I do think that there needs to be an open willingness to confront that uncomfortable truth.
No, I absolutely agree with you on that. It's obviously more performative, because if it wasn't, it would be addressing the actual issues, and we know that's not what it's doing. They are inherently terrified of not being able to deal with the media backlash and the communication backlash. The way this actual report and these new guidelines came about all happened under the previous government anyway. So it's not even like they were directly involved with creating this, with implementing it, with anything like that. All that's happened is it's come through and they've realised, oh no, if any one of these can stick, it's over for us. Reform are gonna surge in the polls, and then the narrative's done. It's over. And it's a really sad way of governing, actually. Because why are you there? Why are you in government? Fundamentally, you're in government to make things better.
It's true.
Why are you there? Why are you there? If you don't want to make things better, why are you there?
It's true.
And it's really frustrating because these are very, very significant issues that need to come through. But now we have people, like you said, who come from law backgrounds, who haven't actually been within the communities that are directly affected by these things for so long in their lives now. As again, I'll unfortunately keep, pounding this drum for probably my entire life. It is going to be a class-based issue. And unless you're willing to address it like that, unless you're willing to see that, again, all of these top-level government policies, all of these top-level, the cuts that you were talking about, disproportionately affect people, working-class people, real working-class people too, not the working-class people that, Starmer will just, again, shout the words working-class people and hope that it works. No, like real people in their everyday lives are affected by this over and over and over again, and that's how we get this two-tier system that is pushed through and seen in the statistics that you were talking about. And unless you're going to be willing to address that, nothing is going to change. But as we've said, they're not going to be willing to address that because they're terrified of, the backlash, and they don't have a plan to combat it.
So no plan whatsoever, no plan to fix the fact that minoritized communities are struggling, no plan to fix the fact that working class communities are literally in dire need of help. So yeah, in true cynical fashion, I think that the outrage over two-tier justice has a lot of theatre to it. And if both government and opposition are furiously agreeing that these guidelines are bad, then I think one wonders who they are probably performing for. They're definitely not performing for us. So I think there needs to be, they need to interrogate that. They need to go back to the drawing board with that one.
The thing you've got to remember is that they're not ever affected by stuff like this, not anymore. They may have been when they were younger. They're definitely not now. They don't exist within the world and within knowing people having themselves directly affected by the way in which the justice system is or can manifest. So essentially we have people working at that very top who have no idea what they're actually trying to do. They have no real experience of what's going on. And once again, unless that is something that is directly addressed, then it's never going to change.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.